How does call forwarding work when users roam? How do you want it to work? We looked at two call forwarding scenarios in our call forwarding and voicemail drawing. A simple option where users configure call forward all, and we configure all other destinations as go to voicemail, and a more complicated scenario with additional requirements for user configuration and destinations. Let's look at roaming with our more complicated scenario. Enterprise 20 has these requirements for call forwarding. Whatever we do, it had better be easy to explain to our users. We'll never allow call forwarding to E911. Some users expect to configure forward all, forward busy, and forward no answer destinations themselves. We will allow call forwarding to local numbers in all cases. We will allow call forwarding to long distance numbers if the user has to log in to configure the destination. Remember that our long distance class of service blocks high risk area codes. And we need to configure lines differently for different kinds of users. And remember, we changed the local route group for redirected calls service parameter from its default, local route group of calling party, to local route group of last redirecting party to fix bad call forwarding behavior. This is important. Call forwarding for roaming EM profiles uses the roaming site's local route group. Devices roaming with device mobility use the home site's local route group. But call forwarding didn't work for external numbers for Chloe's EM profile if use local route group of last redirecting party is configured. We found bug CSC UI 38797. We upgraded to 9.1.2.12901-3 to fix this. Remember, we are using the line device or blocking on lines model. The device gets a site-specific unrestricted calling search space. The line gets a global blocking calling search space. Patterns on the line always stay the same when roaming. Line partitions take priority over device partitions. Patterns on the device and the local route group can change when roaming. Extension mobility users always inherit the device configuration at the roaming site, and soft phones like CIPC and any physical devices that roam can use device mobility to inherit a device configuration from a roaming site device pool. All of our site-specific patterns are on the device. Roaming users inherit the device configuration at the roaming site with the site-specific patterns for that site. Users inherit the site-abbreviated dialing behavior, and users inherit the site-specific external dialing behavior of the roaming site, and the roaming site local route group is used to route calls to the local gateways. But call forwarding calling search spaces don't work this way. We fixed problems with call forwarding calling search spaces by creating separate forwarding calling search spaces for each site, as illustrated here. Here's the initial configuration for Chloe's line 85736001. We may change the calling search spaces to unrestricted for testing. We'll also change the destinations. Here are the settings for Chloe's remote destination profile. The calling search space is left blank for the moment for illustration. This calling search space is used for mobile voice access. We'll talk about that in another drawing. The rerouting calling search space is used for Mobile Connect to control what remote destinations are valid. The line calling search space has nothing to do with Mobile Connect. We use a forwarding calling search space as discussed in the call forwarding drawing. We'll test forwarding when Chloe logs into the Halifax site using extension mobility or roams with CIPC and device mobility. Be careful. Forwarding behavior for devices roaming with extension mobility and device mobility is different. Also, forwarding behavior for the EM profile is different. If line 85736001 is a shared line on another device, or if it's only associated with the EM profile. Here's something to think about. What happens if we are using the local route group of the last redirecting party, and the line we are calling is shared by devices with different local route groups? Try finding an answer to this in the Cisco documentation. We tested Chloe's CIPC and EM profiles separately without sharing the line to better understand the behavior. We put CIPC and EM in the line text labels to differentiate the devices. Remember from dial plan for call forwarding and voicemail, there are two kinds of patterns to test. Site-specific, patterns that have site-specific routing local to a site, including site-specific abbreviated dialing and local 7 and 10-digit dialing. E911 and service codes are site-specific, but we don't care about them for forwarding. And global, patterns that are global, including internal numbers which are global for the enterprise, and long distance and international patterns that can be routed out any gateway in the enterprise. These two kinds of patterns have different behavior. Let's test forwarding for site abbreviated dialing. Can we call forward all Chloe's CIPC to Halifax number 7751? No, we can't. After entering 7751, after the T.302 timer expires, we get fast busy. Same thing for both the CIPC and EM profile. We hit the T.302 timer because the Montreal 57 site abbreviated dialing patterns are 5 digits. Can we call forward all Chloe's CIPC to Montreal 36002? Yes, we can. Call forwarding to site abbreviated numbers works like at the Montreal site, not the roaming site. Same thing for both the CIPC and EM profile. That's because we are using the Montreal 57 forward local no 911 calling search space, site-specific calling search space. It's not possible to make call forwarding work like at the Halifax site for a user roaming there from Montreal. Call forwarding for site abbreviated numbers works like at the Montreal site for both Chloe's CIPC and EM profile. Let's look at 7 and 10-digit dialing for Chloe's roaming CIPC. Call forward all Chloe's roaming CIPC to the 7-digit Halifax number 310-0000 configured on all test phones for each area code. Then we call 8-573-6001 to see what happens. Let's keep an eye on the Montreal 57 test phone, which has the same 7-digit number configured. Remember that the same 7-digit number called from two different locations, Montreal and Halifax in this case, represent two different parties, one in Montreal and one in Halifax. When we call 8-573-6001, we are forwarded to the local Montreal 7-digit number, not the Halifax 7-digit number. Now call forward all Chloe's CIPC to the 10-digit Montreal local number 514-460-0000. The call rings on the Montreal test phone. Call forwarding for all site-specific numbers works like at the Montreal site for Chloe's roaming CIPC. Let's look at 7 and 10-digit dialing for Chloe's roaming EM profile. Call forward all Chloe's EM to the 7-digit Halifax number 310-0000, configured on all test phones for each area code. Then we call 8-573-6001 to see what happens. Remember, the number 3100000 represents a different party at each site. The call is forwarded to the 7-digit Halifax number 3100000 via the Halifax gateway. Now call forward all Chloe's EM profile to the 10-digit Montreal local number 514-460-0000. When Chloe's EM profile is forwarded to the 10-digit Montreal local number 514-460-0000, forwarding does not work. The call is being routed out the Halifax gateway, and we need a 1 for that number at that gateway. Now call forward all Chloe's EM profile to the 10-digit Halifax local number 902-238-0000. We can only enter the first 7 digits. Why? Our call forwarding search space is for Montreal, not Halifax. This calling search space doesn't have a 10-digit pattern for the Halifax 902 local area code because we removed the delay for 7-digit dialing. The 7-digit local pattern is being matched. We have a conflict between site-specific dialing at Halifax and the site-specific dialing in the Montreal 57 forward local no 911 calling search space. This conflict prevents call forwarding to any 10-digit numbers when roaming. That's crazy talk. Call forwarding to a roaming extension mobility profile uses the local route group of the device at the roaming site. Call forwarding to a device roaming with device mobility does not use the local route group at the roaming site. Neither does an EM profile logged into a roaming device. If a line is shared between an EM profile and a device, CIPC in our case, then call forwarding does not use the roaming local route group for the shared line. The EM profile will act like the device. We opened a TAC case to validate that this is the expected behavior. The case has been escalated and we are still waiting for an answer. Call forwarding for Chloe's CIPC works like at the Montreal site for site-specific numbers. Call forwarding for Chloe's EM profile works like at the Halifax site for site-abbreviated dialing and 7-digit numbers, and is broken for 10-digit site-specific numbers. When we try to forward Chloe's EM profile to the long-distance number 1-722-555-0000, we get fast busy. That's because our call forward calling search space is restricted to local numbers. We'll change that for testing. Forwarding to long-distance number 1-722-555-0000, forwarding works. The call routes out the Halifax gateway. The call will also work for Chloe's CIPC, but is routed out the Montreal gateway. When Chloe's EM is forwarded to international number 011-698-0000, forwarding works. The call routes out the Halifax gateway. The call will also work for Chloe's CIPC, but is routed out the Montreal gateway. Call forwarding to global numbers works. It doesn't really matter what gateway we use to route the call. Let's test Mobile Connect. Chloe's cell phone 514-460-0000 is configured as her remote destination. When we dial 8573-6001, the CIPC line will ring, and then the Montreal local line 514-460-0000, Chloe's cell phone, will ring. Mobile Connect works like at the Montreal site for Chloe's CIPC. When we dial 8573-6001, the EM profile line will ring, but the Montreal local number 514-460-0000, Chloe's cell phone, will not ring. When roaming with extension mobility, we have the same problem with 10-digit remote destinations as we have for call forwarding destinations. When roaming with extension mobility, 10-digit Montreal numbers can't be routed out the roaming gateway because they need a 1. When roaming at the Halifax site, we can't use a 10-digit Halifax number because our rerouting calling search space is for Montreal, not Halifax. This calling search space doesn't have a 10-digit pattern for the Halifax 902 local area code because we removed the delay for 7-digit dialing. Let's adjust the rerouting calling search space so we can change the remote destination to Halifax local number 902-238-0000. When we dial 8573-6001, the EM profile line will ring, and then the Halifax local number 902-238-0000 will ring. We know what's going on. We're just not happy about it. Mobile Connect and call forwarding have similar problems. Call forwarding to 10-digit numbers is broken when roaming with extension mobility. This playbook is continued in Dial Plan for Mobility Part 4. Part 4 discusses AAR and CFR for roaming devices and provides some final fixes.